When thinking about the most iconic of the action game genre, a lot of classics come to mind. One of those is, of course, Devil May Cry. Speaking for myself, I've never had any real history with the series up until playing through DMC4 and the reboot as of late, but I'd say I'm very much hooked on it now. With the series on its 25th year of stylish romps and the release of the upcoming Season 2 of the Netflix anime, I figured why not take a look back at the grandfather that defined the genre. A scrapped Resident Evil 4 reforged into an adventure starring a wacky woohoo pizza man. Devil May Cry. As I stated before, this game is quite old from the day of its original release on the PlayStation 2. Even so, fans have continued to enjoy it through that time for its engaging combat, over-the-top antics, and gothic atmosphere. But does that still ring true, or is it just nostalgia talking? Well, as Dante would put it,
let's rock, baby.
with how far the series has come, it's easy for DMC1 to be slept on. There are plenty of reasons why, as we'll soon get into, but I also feel there's a lot of intrigue and charm that DMC3 or DMC5, some of the greatest games of all time, are sort of missing. One thing is very clear when you first boot the game up, but before that, a bit of context. Devil May Cry stars Dante, a one-of-a-kind devil hunter and the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. Sparta was a demon warrior who rebelled against the underworld and fell in love with a woman named Eva. She would eventually bear two twin sons, Dante and Virgil. But Sparta has long since vanished now, and decades later, Dante runs a demon hunting business called Devil May Cry to find the one responsible for the attack that killed his mother and his brother. One day, a mysterious woman named Trish approaches Dante to inform him of the return of Mundus, king of the underworld. Seeing him to be a prime target on the death of his family, Dante travels to Malay Island with Trish to prevent Mundus' revival and destroy him for good. And that's all you need to know to get into the game. It is very simple and by the numbers, yet I wouldn't call that a bad thing because of how the game presents itself from the beginning. The intro cutscene is perfect at setting up the adventure. We learn everything needed to understand who and what Dante's deal is. He's competent but relaxed. He gets snarky with his supposed threat and pays for that arrogance, only to flip control over his enemy back to him once focused. And this way of thinking that the protagonist has is personified by the gameplay. Before entering combat though, you are first trapped within the castle and have to find a way to escape the main hall. This is your chance to test out the controls in a safe environment, seeing how movement works, how swordplay is done, and the functionality of the camera. The game uses a fixed camera throughout, and it's pretty commonly disliked for the frustration it can cause. I can easily see why, because some angles are completely insufficient and the cramped nature of the world can make the situation worse. Even if personally I never ran into much trouble with it, notwithstanding muscle memory from playing DMC3 prior. The castle is the main setting of the game, and between battles you need to keep finding ways to advance. Exploration isn't too taxing and a lot of the puzzles are fairly easy to solve, often just being an item a few rooms away or locked behind an enemy. And that second half is exactly what leads us into the real bulk of Devil May Cry. What I find interesting about the combat in DMC1 is how user-friendly it is at the start. I know that sounds like a bold claim to a majority of those who've played the game firsthand, but allow me to paraphrase. Dante expectedly doesn't start with a giant list of tools at his disposal. All he has is Sparta's sword, Force Edge, and Ebony and Ivory, his twin handguns. Force Edge only has so many combos it can do, yet I think it works. It doesn't overwhelm the player with options or demanding inputs. Attacking is done with X and mashing does the basic string of attacks, but by delaying the press at a certain interval you can perform different ones. Holding the analog stick in a few directions during attack does more unique actions such as High Time, which launches the enemy in the air. With this, you can propel yourself skyward and do the Helm Breaker on an enemy, or keep them suspended in the air with bullets. Firearms have unlimited ammo, but they aren't going to carry you to victory as you'll see with the first few puppet enemies. They attack in close range of Dante, but they will disrupt you if you're keeping your distance. This makes it so the player is actively engaged in the combat, allowing them to get a feel for how to assess a battle, with the game even acknowledging how well you do at that. During combat, a letter grade will appear at the top, starting from dull, cool, bravo, absolute, and finally ending at stylish. The higher your rank is, the more red orbs you earn. You find these very early on and they serve as in-game currency, but they don't do anything just yet. You lose your rank by taking damage, spamming the same moves, or simply failing to keep the momentum going. Guns won't keep it up at all unless you're juggling enemies. You must directly confront your foes, to which at this point you may lack the ability to do so. That is when the game enters overdrive. At the start of Mission 2, Dante will find a sword imbued with lightning, Alistair, where you are greeted with the most roundabout yet sickest way to obtain a new weapon. From this point forward, Alistair is your default weapon, and it opens up the combat even further, allowing you to buy cool new moves to perform and also unlocking an important ability in Dante's kit. Devil Trigger. 3 runes appear below his health, and when 3 of them are active, you can enter a brief super mode where Dante's damage, speed, and defense are heightened. This state also has special abilities only it can use, like Air Raid and Vortex, which lets you fly around the room and rain lightning down upon your foes. All these are things you buy in the shop, which is another part of the game that opens up after receiving Alistair. With your gather red orbs between missions or at the divinity statues is where you can purchase moves for your weapons and temporary or permanent items to use. Alistair gets the ever crucial Stinger and the most underrated move in the series, Round Trip. A lot of the latter is stuff you can find while exploring through the castle, such as Vital and Devil Stars, the most crucial item being yellow and blue orbs. Yellow orbs are your lives, and if all of them are lost, you're forced to reload the save file after getting a game over. Blue orbs are divided into fragments, and when 4 of them are gathered, you get a slight health increase. These are often really easy to find in the early game. Any of the temporary items, however, are disencouraged by the game to use them, as resorting to any of these tanks your end stage rank by a huge margin. But like I said, not all these are locked behind the shop, including the additional guns such as the shotgun and the grenade launcher. I'll be delving more into these mechanics as we go along, but for now, Mission 3 is where you'll encounter the first of the 4 bosses, Phantom. This giant magma spider appears before Dante inside the cathedral, and one may feel intimidated by the presence of such a huge battle ahead of them. Yet in spite of that, Dante makes fun of it, unfazed by its threatening stature. It's a stick moment that gets you pumped up for the fight. And this goes for most of the battles, one of my favorites being the one right after this, the first Michelangelo encounter. Dante's own reflection walks out of the mirror in an ominous fashion, but he still remains collected and laughs in the face of his enemy. And that's when the mysterious knight beckons him outside for a duel that is rightfully one of the best fights in the game. These 2 I've listed are your main foes for the first third of the game, but you'll mainly be up against Phantom, a daunting task for new players, and when you think you've beaten him, he just reappears unexpectedly looking for more. That is until it all culminates in the final encounter in Mission 9, where you come full circle with your mastery of combat from all the previous trials to send him back to hell with one of my personal favorite scenes in the entire saga.
You're right. I'm his son, Dante. Sweet dreams.
The first third of Devil May Cry 1 as a whole is just complete excellence in game design, and it is all through the pacing. You're dropped into a creepy atmosphere that you must fight through, a lot being very tough on a new player with how aggressive the enemies are. But as you venture further and further through the castle, you begin to build up confidence throughout your various encounters with Phantom, Shadow, and Michelangelo. You grow even stronger than before with Alistair and the upgrades gathered along the way. It all comes together in a satisfying finale that makes you feel accomplished. You overcame a larger-than-life figure and stand leagues above him now. All that remains is the question of, what next? Well, that's when Dante is able to escape the castle and into the courtyard. It's around here where the game starts introducing new challenges and weapons. Weirdly named enemies aside, this is when the puzzle solving gets a little bit more advanced, like needing to protect this light from enemies in this looping forest or the first-person swimming controls. The latter is pretty infamous for being clunky, and that's fair, but I find them rather harmless. They're too short to warrant complaining about for 5 minutes. Plus there's a certain other game I can do that with. Anyway, the enemies here are some of the best to fight in the whole game. I'd say DMC 1 has probably the most consistent roster of standard enemies, because it isn't like 3 or 4 where you have a couple enemies that are so god-awful to deal with. But with the original game, despite shadows being kind of obnoxious, you get more enemies that have nothing to annoy you with during battle, especially since a lot of your tools are very good at dealing with every threat in the game. On that note, new weapons are here to be found as well. Firstly, there's a grenade launcher. This firearm may seem kinda useless because of the huge delay between shots, but if you perform a dodge roll, you can get rid of it entirely, making the weapon very useful for dealing with crowds of enemies and building Devil Trigger. The most important unlock Dante receives here though is Ifrit. This is the first of many hand-to-hand options in the DMC series, and it introduced a lot of staples like the charging mechanic. Being the origin point, it doesn't have amazing mobility, and to be honest, DT is kind of necessary for its potential to shine, but since it's so easy to gain Devil Trigger at this point in the game, it doesn't really matter. The power this weapon has is unmatched, like the Inferno maneuver that does a motherload of damage against bosses. Bringing it up does unfortunately mean we've reached a point of contention in DMC 1. Like I said earlier, the first half of the game is paced so perfectly with amazing bosses and such, but once you reach the courtyard, a lot of the later encounters don't stack up to what was fought previously. While we get a second duel with Nelangelo, the third boss is this giant bird named Griffin.
Are you the human, the son of Sparta who challenges the darkness for this?
Block off, Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way.
Cool intro notwithstanding, these fights by comparison are pretty weak. This is one instance where I feel like the camera can get in the way of things, especially in the second encounter, but this also further drives the terrible platforming controls home. Even with Air Hike, the double jump upgrade, Dante's ability to jump from platform to platform is one thing he's not stylish at. And spoiler alert, this won't get any better for another 3 games in a row. Air Hike for some reason is also locked to Alistair. All Ifrit can do is get the ability for jumping to do damage, which I guess is fine and you can switch weapons on the fly, but I just find that to be an odd restriction. Back to Griffin though, the first fight is decent and on repeat playthroughs, it is skippable. The second bout though is just a war of attrition. I can barely tell what's going on during this fight, let alone what the orange lightning does. The final encounter is at least a serviceable finale to these as we get to see a side of both Mundus' cruelty and Dante's resentment for those like the Demon King. Seeing this version of the character after spending years with the wacky woohoo pizza man from 3 and onward is kind of jarring, but I still believe these two are the same person. Dante doesn't do a lot of batshit stunts from before, however you can tell that this is still the same devil-may-care attitude we all know and love. I've gone over this earlier with the bosses, but I really have come around on this version of the Devil Hunter. He's cheeky, a wise ass, but deliberate. He knows he's in a lot of danger while being on the island, but he always asserts control of the situation. The delivery of his lines helps sell the character as well, and while the voice acting in general isn't great, I think it's much more entertaining than some other titles due to the very over-the-top nature of this game, even if it shows signs of serious undertones. But once all is said and done, we've reached the final third of the game. Dante returns to the castle, and now it's a lot more horrifying. DMC 1 might just have the most immersive atmosphere in the whole series. None of the others don't capture this feeling in their own ways, but this one just has the most sauce. Malay Island, even from the beginning, feels like a real place, a castle lost to time and never rediscovered. The courtyards are desolate, the interiors are dark and induce a sense of dread. You can just faintly hear noises in the distance like music or shrieking. The various set pieces Dante can interact with give additional context to what went down and just adds to the spooky setting. All of this is definitely the product of it originally being a Resident Evil 4 prototype, and it doesn't let down throughout the entire adventure. After exploring around the twisted castle, the final showdown with Nelangelo occurs, where it's revealed that he was actually Dante's twin brother Virgil. To be honest, it's hard to imagine that this character has existed since the beginning and not in DMC 3 because of how iconic he became in that title. Upon defeat though, he drops his half of the amulet given to his and Dante's mother. With both pieces, he's able to reawaken Force Edge into its true form, the Devil Sword Sparta. This sword unfortunately is just okay. It has all the same moves as Alistair with a greater range, but it lacks DT and the quick switch for Ifrit is also gone. so it's better off just to switch back to Alistair. In hindsight, it's kind of funny how it is the ultimate sword in the lore, but one of the most inferior weapons in most of the games until 4 and 5. Weak unlock aside, this is also when the nightmare battles are introduced. This might be the most intrusive encounter in the game, with how you constantly need to hit switches to give it a solid form, and or the thing dragging you into the abyss to refight a previous boss. In any circumstance, this boss fight is the least I enjoy, and the third encounter is the pinnacle of the camera being problematic. This is also when Trish, after only making a few brief appearances throughout, betrays Dante. I've neglected to acknowledge the story for most of the runtime. That's because, again, there isn't much up until now. Trish was intentionally designed by the Demon King to resemble his mother and lure Dante to his death. In spite of her act in trying to kill Dante, he saves her from a crumbling pillar before telling her to get lost. The last few missions see Dante navigating through the underworld maze to open up the way to Mundus' chamber, culminating in the final encounter inside. Mundus uses Trish as a distraction to kill the Son of Sparta, but she steps in and ends up dying instead. Her death is not made in vain, however, as this gives Dante the last boost of strength he needs to awaken his father's power. The final boss is a bit of a wash, unfortunately. The first phase is the shoot 'em up where you need to charge your DT to take out a large chunk of his health bar. If you bought a bunch of purple orbs prior, you'll win fairly quickly, but it's still somewhat clunky due to the inverted controls and the damage you take from his attacks. The second phase is only slightly better. You finally get double trigger with the DSD, but the fight itself is pretty unremarkable. After finishing Mundus seemingly down for now, Dante mourns the death of Trish with perhaps the most iconic line read in human history.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Leaving both his amulet and sword behind with Trish, Dante makes his way to quickly escape the island before it collapses. Mundus, however, returns to impede his escape, giving us the true final phase. Although, if you bought Vortex beforehand, this becomes the easiest fight in the game. That is, until Trish unexpectedly returns from the dead to give him one last power boost to send Mundus back to hell, finishing him with that iconic catchphrase.
Jackpot!
I will return, and I will rule this world!
Goodbye. And when you do come back, give my regards to my son, will ya?
With the defeat of Mundus, Dante and Trish miraculously escape and form an alliance as partners of Devil May Cry, marking the end of DMC 1.
Okay, let's get it over with in 10 minutes. Can't let a single one of those suckers live.
5 minutes.
More than enough.
This isn't the end, however, as New Game Plus and Hard Mode open up to you afterwards. If that last part was enough, head on into Dante Must Die mode and see if that'll be the true ultimate torture. Nonetheless, there's a bunch of new twists to find on higher difficulties, like harder enemies placed in earlier sections or yellow orbs replacing previously found blue orbs. There's even an alternate costume in the form of the legendary Dark Knight after completing hard mode. At the end of it all though, I hold this first entry in a very high regard. This video was admittedly shorter than anticipated and not super in-depth, but I feel like I've gotten the point across. Devil May Cry was genre defining for its time, and I think it has aged remarkably well. While it lags behind most future entries in complexity and content, DMC 1 is just so easy for me to appreciate and respect. It was built from the salvage of an unrelated gameplay style and managed to open the doors for being a top dog at Capcom, going on to be the blueprint for some of the most fantastic games in the medium, yet still being just as enjoyable today. Some things don't hold up, like the camera, and I think some missions are pretty weak, but those don't prevent me from loving it as much as I do now. This is definitely a keeper for me, and I wholeheartedly recommend it to anybody looking for a classic challenge with a little bit of cheesiness. Soon I'd like to cover the entire original trilogy on PS2, which means y'all know what next time is. But sorrows for that aside, it's been nearly 25 years and we'll still be counting for another. And while the series is in uncertain territory and is currently in the hands of a misguided project that I will not cover, nothing will take away from the sheer charm and wit of our wise-ass Devil Hunter. Here's to the next 25 years, Dante. Keep on making it stylish. And with that, I thank you all so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic night. And as always, take care.